Well, students, we're on our next section for our nature unit. So we're going to be reading more about John Burroughs and his writing that he did about nature. So our focus today is identify the main idea and key details in text, and using those key details to summarize the main idea. And finally, writing a main idea statement to demonstrate our understanding. So let's jump right in. So we have this text that we'll be looking at today. I noticed just by looking at the pictures, it again is going to involve nature. And we've already read something by John Burroughs. He was the person who did the A Bird's Free Lunch. But you'll notice he's not our author for this one. It's actually Jeffrey. And so we're going to be looking at kind of a biography of him for this. So this has two examples of Burroughs' writing. So there's an essay about him that there's going to be italicized, like right here. And if it's italicized, that means John Burroughs wrote it. If it's not italicized, so it's not excerpt, it's just regular writing like this, that means it's going to be done by Jeffrey. Now, the other thing we're going to look at is this poem by him called Waiting that he did as well. Let's look at these first pages now. The writing of John Burroughs. Pioneering nature writer John Burroughs, 1837 to 1921, found his artistic voice and also a sense of delight and wonder by carefully observing the world around him. He grew up on a farm in Delaware County, New York. As a boy, one of his favorite things to do after completing his chores was to escape to a special place he later called Boyhood Rock. Burroughs liked to look out from this old spot on Old Clump Mountain, a part of the Catskills, and think deeply about what he was seeing. So this first paragraph tells me that when he was young, John Burroughs used to think about what he was seeing in nature while in the Catskills. I think this detail is important to explain Burroughs' interest in nature, so I'm going to underline it. And so we're going to put was he liked to go to that special place. He liked to escape to a special place where it looked out over. So let's go on to paragraph number 2 now. Burroughs' habit of studying and reflecting on nature stayed with him his entire life. He became a teacher and government worker and also gained fame writing essays for magazines. By the 1880s, Burroughs had become a full-time writer. He wrote of fishing and hiking. He wrote about the seasons. He wrote the birds, flowers, and animals he saw outside his window. So this paragraph explains that Burroughs wrote about the nature and seasons, and the things he saw in nature. These are details I'm going to underline. What did he write about? Then he also wrote about fishing and hiking. Paragraph 3. Burroughs spent most of his life near where he grew up. In summers, he preferred the view from a small cabin in the woods, which we can see right down here. He named this place Slab Size, and from it he recorded the daily lives and interactions of his animal neighbors. So, let's look what we have so far. Look at what we have underlined to make our main idea. So, looking back over the key details that I have underlined, I can identify the main point of view of the text. So this is what I have. John Burroughs was interested in nature from the time he was young, and this interest led him to focus on nature in his writing as an adult. So that's going to be what I'm going to put my notes to the side. Let me slide this over. And then we drag it out. Remember, we just make it bigger so we can have it more legible. Now we're going to look at this poem that we have on this side. Waiting. Serene, I found my hands in wait, nor care for wind, nor tide, nor sea. I rave no more against time or fate, for lo, my own shall come to me. I stay my haste, I make delays, for what avails this eager pace? I stand amid the eternal ways, and what is mine shall know my face. Asleep, awake, by night or day, the friends I seek are seeking me. No wind can drive my bark astray, nor change the tide of destiny. What matter if I stand alone? I wait with joy the coming years. My heart shall reap where it has sown, and garner up its fruit of tears. The waters know their own, and draw the brook that springs in yonder height. So flows the good with equal law, until the soul of pure delight. The stars come nightly to the sky, the tidal wave unto the sea. Nor tide nor space, nor deep nor high, can keep my own away from me. So this part at the end says, none of this stuff can keep my own away from me. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it should be important since it's at the end. So we're going to come back and focus on this later. But what I want us to remember is that this poem is an example of Burroughs' writing. He wrote poems about nature. And the introduction that we had over here tells us what? It tells us that the poem is about the timelessness of nature. He enjoys this special place because he never ever leaves it in his whole life. So let's continue, and we're going to go on to our next page. We're going to look at paragraphs 4 and at paragraphs 5. Let me zoom in so we can see them a little better. Burroughs is often praised for his descriptive writing. Its style of observation is more literary than scientific. He takes the reader on the same personal journey he is experiencing, narrating the events. So even though he's observing nature, he's writing more like it's a story than describing it scientifically. So I'm going to underline those for some key details. Looking at paragraph 5 now, it says, his gentle lyrical writing gives a human dimension to non-human subjects. For example, in The Chipmunk, Burroughs observes the main character emerging from his winter nest. Now rested, the chipmunk is ready for a glorious spring. Notice this thing right here. It's a little asterisk. So I'm not sure what that means. Typically when we see an asterisk, there's going to be something at the bottom that tells us why we have that. But as I scroll, I'm not seeing the purpose of that asterisk. So even as an adult, I'm not sure what it's there for. But what I do know is this part right here where he says he gives a human dimension to non-human subjects. And if I remember from my lesson yesterday, that is personification, where he's giving people traits to animals. So what do we have right here? We know that we're going to be learning about the chipmunk. So since we're now switching to another type of writing, we're going to switch to actual Burroughs writing. I'm going to do my summary right here. So let's increase it. John Burroughs writes about nature in such a way that he gives animals human qualities, period. So this is my summary of what's happened in 4 and 5, and now we're going to read about the chipmunk and see what we notice or learn from it. So let's begin. Paragraph 6. The first chipmunk in March is as sure a token of the spring as the first bluebird or the first robin, and it is quite as welcome. Some genial influence has found him out there in his burrow, deep underground, and waked him up and enticed him forth into the light of day. The red squirrel has been more or less active all winter. His track has dotted the surface of every new fallen snow throughout the season. But the chipmunk retired from early view in December. He has passed his rigorous months in his nest. He rests beside his hoard of nuts, some feet underground. When he emerges in March and is seen upon his little journeys along the fences, or perched along a log or a rock near his hole in the woods, is another sign that spring is at hand. So we have this part about a chipmunk, and he's telling me that he's waking up. He's been more or less active all winter. So our chipmunk has been woken up by what? Well, because it's springtime. And it's told me that he's passed the rigorous months in his nest, so he's stayed hunkered down. But now that it's spring, now that it's March, he's on his journey. It's another sign that spring is at hand. So let's look now at paragraph 10 and keep going. Burroughs now describes the main character, the chipmunk, by describing his actions. Note though that Burroughs, as the storyteller, is part of the story too, so he's going to tell me about this chipmunk. I was much amused one October in watching Chipmunk carry nuts and other food into his den. He had made a well-defined path from his door out through the weeds and dry leaves into the territory where his feeding ground lay. The path was a crooked one. It dipped under weeds, under some large, loosely piled stones, and on a pile of chestnut posts that followed the remains of an old wall. So here we have our chipmunk. What's he doing? The chipmunk is carrying nuts and other food into his den, so he's gathering those resources. Up on our... Oops, Mr. Wimbley made a mistake. I skipped down here when that was our new page, so let's go up here. Burroughs' essays often have a poetic quality. In the next two passages from the chipmunk, Burroughs uses personification when he gives human characteristics to the chipmunk. He also compares the chipmunk's animal's actions to those of human beings. The chipmunk becomes much like a character in the story. The chipmunk is quite a solitary creature. So solitary means alone. I have never known more than one to occupy the same den. Apparently no two can agree to live together. What a clean, pert, dapper, nervous young little fellow he is. How fast his heart beats as he stands by the wall on the roadside. With his hands spread out to his breast, he regards you intently. A movement of your arms, and he darts into the wall with a saucy chirp sound. It has the effect of slamming the door behind him. So we have he darts into the wall. That's describing him. We have these other parts here. It says he's a clean, pert, dapper, nervous little fellow. So we have all these characteristics, these traits in here. So we're going to make our summary now about what has just happened in these paragraphs. So let me extend it. Now we're ready to go. So what have we noticed? Well, we noticed that John Burroughs, he's writing about this chipmunk, and he's giving it human traits, these human characteristics. So what do we know about this chipmunk? The chipmunk spends all winter hunkered down in his nest, period. When it's spring, he wakes up, period. He's a clean, nervous little guy, though, who likes to run back to his nest when he's afraid, period. And maybe nest was the wrong word, so I'm going to change it to the word it used was den. So that's my summary of how John Burroughs has described our chipmunk thus far. Alright guys, good job, and we're going to keep reading on for our next portion with our next video.